Hey YouTube, it's AI Enigma here. So we are back with our Road to Cat RC Explained series. This is a biology-based RC. As usual, I will provide the PDF of the session in the comment section below, so you can access through that PDF. So let's start with the RC. The long-held belief that the extraordinary species diversity in the Amazon River basin of South America is primarily due to climate stability surprisingly originated from observation made in the deep sea. Dr. Sanders, a researcher, observed high diversity among the creatures inhabiting the muddy depth of the ocean. So, there is a long held belief that the extraordinary diversity, that the extraordinary species diversity of the Amazon River basin of South America is due to the, you can say, stable climate that they have. There is a climatic stability over there. That's why there is extraordinary species diversity. And what is this belief based upon? This actually originated from the observation which were made by a in the deep sea by Dr. Sanders. There was a scientist which is called as Dr. Sanders, and he observed. You can say his observation were based on creature which were inhabiting the muddy depth of the ocean, and he applied those observation to the Amazon River. You can say specifically towards the Amazon rainforest. He posited that such diversity could be attributed to the lack of significant fluctuation in climate and physical condition in that environment, which would naturally lead to very low rate of species extinction. So, what you can say, Dr. Sanders said that the diversity arises because the climate is stable. So, because the climate is stable, there is no fluctuation in the environment, or the physical condition of the environment is actually stable. It would naturally lead to the low rate of species extinction, which means less amount of species get killed because environment is stable. That was the hypothesis which was said by Dr. Sanders. Over extended periods, new species would continue to evolve, ensuring that the rate of speciation consistently surpass the rate of extinction, thereby fostering the accumulation of immense biodiversity. So, what Dr. Sanders said that over extended periods, let's say millions of years, or you can say thousands of years, new species will continue to evolve. Why it would continue to evolve? Because the climate is stable. Climate is stable. Like habitat is continuous, and the climate is stable. There is no fluctuation in the environment. Due to that, the rate of extinction is extremely lower, and the rate of new species generation or the evolution of species is constantly surpassing the rate of extinction. Thereby, the accumulation of immense biodiversity is occurring. There is a huge amount of diversity in population in Amazon River. This is the reason that Dr. Sanders gave. Sanders then drew an analogy, arguing that the Amazon tropical rainforest mirrors the deep sea in the climatic stability, and therefore species extinction within it should also be rare. What Sanders said, he actually applied his, you can say, observation to the Amazon rainforest, and he said that what actually is occurring into the, you can say, deep sea, his observation of deep sea actually mirrors or applies to the Amazon tropical rainforest, and that's why the extinction is extremely rare onto that species, and there is a greater amount of species diversity in the Amazon rainforest. This perspective is further supported by evidence indicating that some species of rainforest trees have thrived for approximately 13 million years in the Amazon basin, coupled with the absence of harsh winter and glacial periods. So, what the hypothesis that he proclaimed, Sanders proclaimed, this perspective was actually supported by evidence that there were some rainforest trees which have thrived for approximately 13 million years in Amazon basin, and which were coupled with absence of harsh winters and, you can say, glacial periods. So, what he said that so in the first paragraph we can imagine what Dr. Sanders has said, that like he observed his observation based on, you can say, Amazon deep sea rivers, and then he said if there is a favorable condition, you can say, like the environment is pretty stable, due to which the rate of extinction is pretty low. So that's why new species are, you can say, the rate of speciation is extremely higher than the rate of extinction, and that's why new species are coming, so the biodiversity is specifically higher. And then he mirrors that with his observation that what I've observed in, you can say, deep sea also applies to Amazon rainforest as well, and that hypothesis is supported by the evidence of rainforestry which have been sustained for 30 million years. This is the essence of the first paragraph. Let's go with the second paragraph. However, so immediately I can say there is going to be something which is going to contrast what the previous thing has said. Recent observation have cast considerable doubt on the validity of the stability hypothesis, suggesting instead that the Amazon basis climate has experienced significant fluctuations in the past. Now, what this line indicates, that whatever we have discussed until now, that you can say that climate is being stable, that's why you can say there is huge biodiversity, that everything is being cast into doubt when the premise is being put into a doubt itself, because we say, like the premise is that climate is stable, climate is actually stable, That's why you can say new species are coming up, and that's why there's high amount of biodiversity. But this line and attacks this specific premise as well, that climate is actually not stable. So this may be, since the premise is attacked, then you can say the new species are coming and the biodiversity trace, so there might be some different explanation to that. So let's read it further. Haffer, so there is a scientist, okay, Haffer, for instance, noted that the distinct species of birds inhabit different corners of the basin despite the continuous expanse of green forest stretching from the western to the eastern edges of the region. This observation posed a significant puzzle for biologists studying the distribution pattern of plants and animals. Why would different species occupy separate parts of a seemingly uniform forest if the habitats' climates had always been stable? So this is the main consideration that you have to understand. So there is a scientist which is called as Haffer. He noted that there were distinct species of birds and they were inhabiting different part of the basin. So let's say if this is the basin, so there were different species of birds which were inhabiting this part and this part and this part and this part. So that posed a problem, because let's say there were some scientists which were tribal to which want to identify the species demographic, or you can say the scientists who were studying the distribution patterns of plants and animals. So the question arises, why is that species are actually living only here, here, here and here, and not onto this spot, although the like the climate has been stable for, you can say, the climate, there is no climate fluctuation, or you can say the climate was actually uniform or stable. So that raises a question that maybe the climate was not stable, there may have occurred something, so that's why they are inhabiting this different region. So let's proceed further. Haffer subsequently proposed a compelling explanation for these species distribution patterns. Okay, so we are saying that Haffer proposed a compelling explanation for the species distribution pattern. He observed that species found in higher elevation differed from those in lower elevation. And he also knew that in the Amazon, lowlands tends to be drier than upland. Okay, so what he said, that you can say he separated the Amazon onto two parts. He said that there were uplands and there were lowlands. Haffer said that there is the reason for the species distribution is actually something else. He proposed a compelling evidence. He said that in the species which are found in higher elevation, which he called as upland, they were actually different. The species here were actually different from the species here in the lowlands. This is the first thing that he said. He said that based on this, he hypothesized that during past ice ages, the Amazonian lowlands transformed into arid new desert plains. Concurrently, the more elevated regions retained moisture, effectively serving as isolated refuge for the rainforest diverse flora and fauna. So what he said, that in earlier years, in earlier era, there was an ice age. And due to ice age, this upland, you can say this upland was able to maintain its moisture, so it was wet, and the lowland actually becomes drier, so it converted into a desert or arid lands. Due to that, the species which were like more tend to be on towards the moisture side, or you can say, because Amazon was specifically known for its moisture related content, so specifically those species which were adaptable to moisture, they actually served this area, served as a refugee. All those species would actually inhabit there for their protection, and this area was, you can say, specifically, you can say, not served as a refugee. So because that some species migrated to here, they were able to maintain, or they were substantially different, and some species went on to here. So that is the reason for you can say difference of habitants that he explains. Population that were once continuous become geographically separated and diverged, leading to permanent speciation. So that's the thing that he made, that like the species that went on to there, and the species that went on to there, they become separated. One species went on to here and one species went on to here, so they become geographically separated, and that led to speciation, which means these one species, there's like a single species which went on to these two different lands. Due to this geographical separation, they formed an entirely new species. One species be converted into two species or more. Haffer's hypothesis appears to explain both the observed distribution of species and the unusual level of species diversity. So what does Haffer's hypothesis appears? This explains both the observed distribution of species. Why is that you can say in this block only, you can say 4 species were, you can say they were inhabiting different parts of the species. This is being explained by Haffer's hypothesis, and the unusual level of species diversity. And why is that the diversity of the species is extremely higher in this you can say Amazon basin? This is being explained by Haffer's hypothesis. The ice age refuge would have protected existing species from extinction. So what occurs, because this, this refuge, this ice age refugee was there, so what this ice age refugees of upland did is it protected the species from extinction. Crucially, the periodic geographic isolation of related population would have actively facilitate the development of new species as existing lowland species adapted to the changing climatic conditions. And in what happened in the lowland itself, in the lowland, because the, you can say, the environment became drier, so the species were forced to adapt to this environment, because if they do not adapt to this environment they would get extinct. So species adapted to that environment, and so that led to, you can say, speciation as well. So these species also got converted into a new species. That's the hypothesis that Haffer is saying. Although the definite proof for Haffer's hypothesis remains elusive, which means there is no definite proof for, you can say, Haffer's hypothesis, it has significantly influenced other researchers, prompting them to investigate the effects of various climatic change, okay, such as storms and flooding on species diversity within the Amazon basin. So there is no definite proof of Haffer's hypothesis, but you can say it has prompted the researchers to take into effect of natural disasters such as, like flooding and, you can say, storms, etc. Their ongoing research suggests that such climatic disturbance indeed play a role in accounting for the magnificent diversity of the Amazon rainforest. So, what the ongoing research is going on, this suggests that, you can say, the diversity of the Amazon rainforest is definitely, you can say, influenced by the climatic disturbance, indeed play a role in this kind of thing. So what is, you can say, I will quickly explain what this third paragraph is, because it infers a lot information, and specifically this is a biology based paragraph, so you might feel difficulty in understanding this. So what he said, Haffer provided evidence that, Amazon basin is separated into two parts. There is one part which is called as upland, which is definitely, you can say, moisture related part, it's much more wetter, and there is a part which is extremely dry, and this is called as lowland, and this is dry and arid part. So what occurred due to so a species which was inhabiting a geographical basin, which, at the climate was, you can say, completely fine, but due to ice age, the geographical basin of, you can say, Amazon basin got separated into two geographically different areas, one with upland which retained the moisture, and one with, you can say, lowland which was completely dry. So the species which were, you can say, so species eventually migrated into these two areas. So those species which required moisture, they went to upland, and they were you can say, they were protected from extinction, and some species went on to dryland. Now the species which were inhabiting dryland, they had to adapt to that condition, isn't it? Because if they don't adapt, they would be extinct. So one similar species, when it went to dry, you can say, upland, it remained the same, and when it went to dryland, it had to adapt, so it became a new species as well. So we know that due to this geographical isolation, or, you can say, geographical distribution of a same species, new species were created. That was the hypothesis which was projected by, you can say, Haffer, isn't it? So this is the main thing. So first thing is that the first paragraph talks about Dr. Sanders' hypothesis, and he says that, like, continuous environment is possible. We need a continuous climate, and because of the continuous climate, speciation occurs because extinction levels are low. Then the hypothesis is casted onto doubts due to Haffer. He says that, you are saying that in Amazon basin climate was constant, but it actually is not constant. That's the you can say, the main hypothesis that was made by Haffer, and he provided that the evidence for that was provided by the birds. Like birds inhabited different part of the geographical basin. Then why would they inhabit different part of geographical basin if, you can say, the climate was constant? They should be uniform, but they are not uniform. So that casts a doubt, and then Haffer provides a hypothesis of its own to explain this, you can say, phenomena. So this is the kind of structure that you are trying to look. So let's look at the questions now. It should be fairly doable now. Question number 1. Which of the following represents the most fundamental point of disagreement between Sanders and Haffer's models regarding the mechanism that actively drives the creation of new species, that is speciation? So what was the disagreement between Sanders and Haffer's model? Sanders said that you can say, creation of new species was the role of constant climate. We need a constant climate. If we don't have a constant climate, then creation of new species would not be possible, because if there is a constant climate, then the level of extinction would be low, so new species would be created. But Haffer, on the other side, it said that it is not, you can say, constant climate, but it's based on geographical isolation. That's the kind of distinction that disagrees between Sanders and Haffer's model. So let's any option or any answer which targets that should be our answer. First point, whether speciation is primarily driven by geographical isolation. So this accounts for Haffer's hypothesis, and or across or occurs uniformly across a continuous habitat. So this is definitely accounts for Sanders hypothesis. So this is the answer because it encapsulates both the hypothesis and the fundamental differences between both the hypotheses. So one is definitely the answer. Let's check for 2, 3, and 4th. Whether a low rate of species extinction is a necessary precondition for high biodiversity to accumulate. Now the thing is, they don't disagree about low rate of species extinction. They are not disagreeing about low rate of species extinction. What they are disagreeing about is that Sanders is saying that continuous habitat is possible and you can say is necessary, and Haffers is saying it is due to geographical isolation that you can say speciation is occurring. So they are disagreeing over the fact of speciation, how speciation is occurring, not that low rate of species extinction is not the point of contention here. Let's look at the third option. The total evolutionary time frame required for the Amazon's current level of biodiversity to develop. The point is total evolutionary time frame is large for both of them. It's not even a point of you can say disagreement here. Because if you look at Haffer said that with an estimated 13 ice age occurring to date. So accordingly to Haffer, over the course of 13 ice age, so that's like a lot of time, like million years, something like that. And if you look at the Sanders hypothesis said approximately 30 million years. So time frame is not the point of contention here. So this is also wrong. Then look at the fourth option, the relative importance of Amazonian uplands versus the lowlands in sustaining life over millions of years. Well, it's not the relating importance of you can say uplands and lowlands. That's the point of you can say contention here. And if you mark this, then you are completely you can say negating the point of you can say Sanders as well. The Sanders has to be given importance, isn't it? What is the Sanders? The uplands and lowlands has not been even discussed in Sanders hypothesis. So this is not the point of you can say disagreement. So that's why the best option is the first option. Let's look at the second question. Imagine a new genetic study reveals that two distinct but closely related species of tree frogs currently live in two separate high elevation upland regions of the Amazon, one in the far west and one in the far east. The study conclusively proves their last common ancestor existed shortly before beginning of the Pleistocene ice age, the discovery word. So what it has said, what the question has said that there is a wetland, like upland specifically. There is an upland, and in the upland there are two distinct species of frog. One is in west and one it is east. And it is known that before ice age struck, before the ice age there was a single species, but after the ice age there were two different species. Okay, so what does this hypothesis proves? Well, this actually proves the Haffer's hypothesis, isn't it? This if this observation is true, then this actually you can say strengthen what Haffer has said. Haffer said that due to geographical isolation, one species can turn into two species because the conditions led them to speciation. That is what you can say Haffer has said. So let's look at the options here. Be most challenging to Haffer's hypothesis. It will not challenge Haffer's hypothesis. It will actually support Haffer's hypothesis. Haffer said the same thing. So this is definitely wrong. Because as it suggests, speciation occurred before ice age begins. So this is wrong currently. This is extremely wrong. This would not challenge Haffer's hypothesis. The main point of Haffer's hypothesis was that there was the same species, and due to geographical distribution, they got inhabited into different areas and then they evolved into different species. That was the main contention. And why these two areas formed? Due to ice age. So after ice age, one species got speciated into two species. That was the main point that the Haffer is making. Second, lend critical support to Haffer's hypothesis by providing a real-world example of its proposed mechanism. Exactly true. It is lending a critical support to Haffer's hypothesis. So second should be the answer. Let's look at third. Support both hypotheses equally as both predict the long-term survival and evolution of species in Amazon. It does not support both as hypotheses equally because Sander has not even mentioned the use of geographical isolation here. So this is definitely wrong. Then we have fourth, weaken Sander hypothesis primarily by proving that Amazonian climate was not always stable. Now, let me tell you one thing. This option is partially correct. This is not wrong. Because if we are providing evidence, if there is an observation that, one frog became two frog after ice age, due to like what the question has said. So it would actually weakens Sanders hypothesis, because Sanders said the climate was stable. It is actually weakening what Sanders hypothesis said, the climate is actually not stable. This is specifically true. But more than that, it is actually lending supports to Haffer's hypothesis. So that's why 2 is a better option than fourth. I'm not saying fourth is wrong. Fourth is actually correct. But 2 is a better option than second. 2 is a better option than fourth. So that's why 2 is the option here. So let's look at the third question. According to the passage, lowlands in the Amazon basin currently differ from the uplands in which of the following respects? We know that you can say lowlands were arid and dry, and the uplands were contented with moisture, so they were wet. So that is the only difference between them. Lowlands are less vulnerable to glaciation during the ice age than are uplands. It's not specifically mentioned that lowlands are less vulnerable. There is nowhere that it's mentioned that they are less vulnerable. So this is wrong. Uplands support a greater diversity of species than do lowlands. Now look at this. It has said that uplands served as a refugees for the species of Amazonian forest, but it does not gives us a number, specific number, that upland has 1 million species and lowland has two, say 0.5 million species. It has not given the specific number yet, so we can't prove with certainty that uplands support a greater diversity of species. So that's why 2 is wrong. Third, uplands are better than lowlands. This is precisely what the question is said, what the passage has said. So we are marking third as the option. Fourth, uplands are more densely populated than lowlands. Exactly. I've said that we have not given the distributing area, that in 1 square feet of upland there are this much population, and in 1 square feet of lowland there are this much population. This has not been mentioned here, so that's why fourth is not the answer. So this is a pretty easy one. Third is the correct answer to this question. Let's look at the fourth question. Which of the following best describes the organization of the passage? So what was the organization of the passage? Let's study. If you look at closely, we discover Sanders' hypothesis, then the evidence supported Sanders' hypothesis is discussed in the passage itself. Then on to the next passage, the evidence is provided which says that this hypothesis is actually wrong, and then Haffer proposes his own hypothesis explaining that evidence. So that has to be the flow of the passage. Let's look at the options. A hypothesis is discussed, evidence that undercuts the hypothesis is presented, and a new hypothesis that may account for the new evidence is described. So this is actually correct. 1 is specifically the answer to this question. Let's further check second question number second, third, and option 2, third and fourth. A recently observed phenomena is described, an explanation for that phenomena is discussed, and the explanation is evaluated in the light of previous research findings. The problem here is that it doesn't, just by reading it, let's say a recently observed phenomena is described. Okay, the phenomena is described, that you can say Sanders explained the phenomena. An explanation for that phenomena is discussed. Sanders explained that phenomena itself, and the explanation is evaluated in the light of previous research findings. The problem is that you are just evaluating the same explanation. There has not been a single hypothesis, there has been 2 hypotheses. First hypothesis given by Sanders, then it is cast into doubt, and then second hypothesis is given. Just by reading the option 2 itself, you may think that there is only one hypothesis. So that's why this option is wrong. Let's look at the third option. Several hypotheses that may account for puzzling phenomena are described and discounted, and a more promising hypothesis presented. There were no several hypotheses that were, you can say, discussed. There were only 2 hypotheses that was discussed, so that's why third is also incorrect. Fourth option. A hypothesis and the assumption on which it is based are described, and evidence is provided to suggest that the hypothesis is only partially correct. Well, it's not partially correct, isn't it? It's not partially correct. Why a hypothesis and the assumption on which based are described and evidence is provided to suggest that hypothesis is only partially correct. So this is the thing that this is also saying that that the evidence is provided and said that evidence the hypothesis is partially correct. It is not taking into account the second hypothesis that being taken also. That's why it's also wrong, and due to this partially correct, this also makes it wrong. So fourth is also incorrect option. So first is the correct option to this RC. So as you see, this is pretty doable RC. The questions were, you can say, specifically fine. There was not tough language which was involved, and if you have made some mistakes, then review those mistakes. And yeah, in the future also we will be keep on solving much more RCs and delving much into a variety of genres.